Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Molten Modular. Today we're looking at the Teenage Engineering Pocket Operator Modular 170. It's this deliciously red little synthesizer designed to be modular, designed to be extremely cool, which is what Teenage Engineering are renowned for, I suppose. And the plan is to have a nice big fat deep dive into this thing to work out what it is, what it does, what it can't do, what it's excellent at, what it's no good at, that kind of thing. A review, yeah, that's the plan. Now I'm aware that Teenage Engineering on a whole splits opinion, and these in particular. I've done a few little videos of jams on this and a few other Instagram bits and pieces and things, and the comments are fascinating. There's people go, oh wow, that's cool. Other people going, oh no, I hate that. And that seems to be the thing. People dismiss the Pocket Operator Modular stuff as being a bit toy-like. Oh, it's a bit of a Fisher-Price toy kind of crappy Lego thing. I don't know. I've been thinking about that. Other people think, oh, it's not unique, it doesn't do anything that everything else doesn't do, which I think is one of those sorts of criticisms you can level at any synthesizer ever. They all pretty much do the same thing. Let's not kid ourselves now. So, I'm coming to this from a position of fascination, because I've always been very, very interested in these, simply because they look amazing. And also, the journey that they've been on has been strange. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to explain that, but there's very little out there on the 170. Cuckoo did a really good video, which was just really a jam, and it's interesting to read the comments on that as well, because there's lots of people going, oh wow, that's really cool, and lots of other people going, oh, I really hate this. So what is it about it that splits opinions so, I don't know, so passionately, perhaps? Don't know if we'll get to the bottom of this, but what I hope to achieve in this video is to demonstrate what it can do. I mean, it's a little synthesizer, it's a monosynth, it's a synthesizer voice, it's one oscillator. What is it exactly are you going to expect from such a machine? What is it that gets people's back up about that? Don't know. Anyway, I'm not going to dwell on that, I'm going to dwell on the unit itself. Now, this originally came out last year. It was revealed at NAMM 2019, along with the 400, which I have sitting over there, which I'm going to do a review of as well, separately. And it created a bit of a stir because they look amazing, but they're also weird. And lots of the videos that came out of NAMM were kind of a bit underwhelming, like lots of just farty noises as opposed to anything interesting. But there was one or two little glimmers of hope amongst that emerged. But then they seemed to immediately run into production problems. No one could seem to get hold of one. They were constantly out of stock on the website. The 170 and the 60 and the little sequencer never seemed to ever appear. And eventually, I think some stock came along and then they had problems with those, and then it didn't, and then it did. And it's been one of those things which has had a tough journey to get itself to where it needs to be. It's also had some tough criticism from people who love it, who hate it. There's been some issues with how you build it, with the power, with other bits and pieces. It's not been, at least my perception from the outside, it's not been a very smooth ride, which is a shame because it's a stunning little thing. Anyhow, at the end of last year, I think it was, or early this year, it turned out that they are back. They're back in stock. They've sort of had a bit of a refresh. They've fixed some of the power problems. They've fixed some of the build problems, which I can tell you, I think, are the fact they put screw threads into all the standoffs, which weren't there before. So before, when trying to build one of these, you had to screw the screw into a piece of plastic in order to generate a screw thread inside, and it's really very, very hard. They've now put proper screw threads in. Hooray! They've adjusted the power. Hooray! So it runs better on batteries. There's no power issues as they may have seen previously. All of that's really good, positive stuff. They've also picked up distribution, which is the point at which I made contact with them, because I know the people who distribute Teenage Engineering now, and I thought perhaps they could lend me one and maybe that would be a good opportunity to do a video. So this has come about because they have now stepped out from just selling them direct, and there's now far more of it available in the channels in your local music shop. So all of that has kind of aligned together to give me the opportunity to review these things. Even though it's been out a year, now is the time, I think, to really have a look at what this does. So that's my overinflated introduction. Should we get down? Should we get down to it? Let's get down to it. Before I bring you in for a closer hands-on look, I just want to give you the overview. So the 170, I mean, just look at it. It's a piece of metal. It's not a plastic box, it's a metal box, folded, something that you have to do yourself when you get it out of the box. Now, I did do a complete build video on this, which is also available on the channel. I did it with my kids, because people keep saying, oh, it's a bit like a toy, innit? So I thought, well, if it's a bit like a toy, maybe my kids could build it. So go and visit that video and see our adventure and how you put it together. Because it was actually a lot of fun, relatively straightforward, and then it became a complete nightmare. But I've explained that in that other video, and suffice to say, had I thought about it a bit longer, I would have had an easier time with it. And it's not a difficult build if you keep your wits about you and you watch my video, which explains all the pitfalls that you may or may not fall into. But as an object, what I keep coming back to time and time again is that this is a beautiful thing to have on the desk, on your rack, in a space, on a coffee table, on top of your turntable, in the house, in the kitchen. It's just a lovely thing. And that's something that Teenage Engineering seem to do really well, is they are able to design things that are extremely pleasing. And there's no way that you can understand that through a video. No way. Having it in your hands as this little console-shaped device, it's just fantastic. And I keep looking at it. It sits there behind me as I'm working, and I keep turning around and just looking at it. The 400 as well. They're just beautiful objects. So Teenage Engineering, if nothing else, have nailed the idea of having a piece of modular synthesis art sitting on a coffee table. 10 out of 10 for that, without any doubt. Then what do you have? What does the box actually promise? Well, you have over here an LFO, a square wave oscillator, a filter, an envelope, and a VCA. That's it. A simple synthesizer voice. Nothing flashy, no effects, nothing extraordinary going on, no weirdness or random or noise. A simple synthesizer voice. Plus, an extraordinarily fully featured, quite awesome and unexpectedly deep sequencer, which is a little bit awkward. Ice cream van. So within the 170, what you get is a complete synth. A synth you can play. You have a keyboard, you have a sequencer, you have an arpeggiator, all of that in there, and you have a synthesizer voice. So you can sit by yourself with this. It can be powered on batteries in here, and it has a speaker. And you can sit and you can amuse yourself for hours. So again, as a device, as an object, as a design of a synthesizer, it's really rather nice. It's complete. You can just go and play with it. You can plug headphones in, obviously, if you don't want to use a really quite crappy speaker here. That's fine, do that. But otherwise, what a brilliant object. What a brilliant object. So now that I've pumped it up a little bit, arpeggiator. Yeah, it's a little synth. Because with this device, context is everything. Because it's a modular synthesizer. Now, it's modular in one way and not modular in another. The way that it's modular is that the signal routing is modular. Each of these modules within the system are completely independent. There's no normalization, there's no background signal connections, so it won't work unless you plug the cables in. You have to patch it. So it is completely modular in that respect. The way that it isn't modular is that you can't take the modules out and replace them with other modules. It's a fixed unit. Even though the modules behind the front panel are individual modules, which you can do that with, the front panel is designed only to take specific modules. So you can't change it. It's fixed. So it's a modular synth without allowing you to change its architecture, I suppose you could say. So in its makeup, it feels a bit like perhaps a Behringer Crave or a Mother 32. It's a single voice, single oscillator, little synthesizer. So price-wise, this is about £399, euros, dollars probably. And so it does pump it up to nearer the Mother 32 than it does perhaps nearer the Crave. But it is modular, proper modular, in as much as it's Eurorack compatible and it's not normaled in any way. So it's not a semi-modular, it's a proper modular. Now, if you were to buy 5 modules and a sequencer in Eurorack form, you'd be looking at well over £1,000. Yeah, I mean, even if you're buying Behringer modules, you've still got to buy a case and a power supply. And then the modules themselves, you're still going to be knocking on the door of £1,000. So, price-wise, it's actually very keenly priced. Although, again, this is one of these things that people throw at it. Oh, it's just an expensive piece of toy crap. I've heard people appear to say, well, no, it's actually rather good value. For what it is, it's good value. And that's what I mean about context. It's not going to compare, perhaps, to a $300 oscillator plus a $300 filter plus a $200 VCA and so on and so on. It's not going to compare to that. It's going to compare quite favourably, I think, to budget synthesizers. Something like a Volca, something like the Crave, something of that nature. That's definitely where it fits. But as with all Teenage Engineering stuff, it is on the slightly more expensive premium side with regard to that level of synthesizer. But when compared to Eurorack, it's bloody good value. So enough of all that. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Okay, let me take you through it. What I've got set up here is obviously the pocket operator itself. Now I've got the output going into my Surface Pro here, which is running the Melder Productions oscilloscope, in order to give us a bit of a view as to what's going on with the signal. I do have some effects I can add, as in through my system, and some delay. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to keep those to a minimum, just perhaps a touch of reverb just to take the edge off, because it comes with no effects at all, and effects like delay and reverb massively improve the overall experience of any synthesizer, this one included. So let's pull everything apart and start at the beginning. The patch cables it's come with are pretty groovy. I like them. They are stereo for no reason that I can discover. Any old patch cable will work just as well, but that's what they are, and they're quite nice. They fit the system and the look of it absolutely perfectly, as you know they would. So when you get it like this, it's a modular synthesizer, so nothing makes any sound. You can't make any sound. You don't get any output until you start patching things together. So let's just have a look at the square wave all by itself. Now, as you can see, you've got LFO over here with 2 squares, 2 triangles. You've got the square wave oscillator with 3 outputs, which is interesting and slightly odd. Pulse width, you've got key, which is the pitch, and then control, which is also the pitch, and a tune, but control is really for frequency modulation, I think you could say. Then you've got a filter, also with 3 outputs, just slightly odd, an input and 2 controls, both of which control the cutoff. Resonance, cutoff down there. You've then got a single envelope with 2 outputs. This enables you to control the envelope of the VCA and also the envelope of the filter simultaneously. Nice idea with an ADSR envelope. Then a VCA at the end with 2 outputs in and of course CV control over it. Then on the back you've got this left-right inputs here. Not entirely sure they make sense, but that's what they are, and you go from your VCA into those, and then this is your headphone output or your line output. For the purposes of this, I'm using the VCA directly as the output because that, funnily enough, gives me a better level for what I'm doing. So let's take the output of the oscillator, see what that looks like. We can also look at that with the spectrum analyzer. So there is pulse width modulation. And there's control for pitch, which I can bring in from the keyboard into key. Or I can bring it in from the LFO into the control input. What you may have noticed there is that the LFO is well up into audio rate. Yeah, it is. Let me show you. So let's just have a look at these LFOs for a moment. Square wave one. Stick that straight to the output. And if we turn it up, yeah, it's a pretty hefty square wave. So is the triangle. In fact, the funny thing about it is that you get very little turn itself for modulation. It goes into audio rate really quick. So, you know, as you can see, it's only on a tiny bit of a turn and it's already making a noise. So you get about, you know, it's not even quarter of a turn before it's starting to become audio rate. And we're going to find in our little journey into the 170 that the knob ranges is one of the things that disappoints. Is that the right word? It doesn't seem to do things quite right. This is one of those. On the other hand, you've got an extra 4 output oscillator for doing audio rate modulation. The other thing to look at here is the pulse width modulation. Again, the range of this knob, how far you can dial, is a bit of a problem. Look, I'm up at what, 11 o'clock, and it's killed the signal. It's already got to past the pulse size. So in terms of modulation, I get about a third of the knob range. So if I use modulation from, say, the triangle, it can very easily push it past the pulse. But it sounds good, it doesn't quite have the range. But what's interesting also is that the LFO is unipolar, so they're only kicking out positive. So it doesn't actually also have the range itself to push the pulse width modulation all the way out of itself. So it can happily play within this area here because the output of the LFOs is relatively low. It's not doing the whole minus part of the wave, it's just doing the top side. And so together as a unit, it actually ends up working quite well. It's just that if you investigate it, you discover that, oh, this is only unipolar and this only goes that far. But it's still sounding pretty great. So next, the envelope. Let's stick an envelope in, see if we can get the envelope to do the enveloping bit. So take the output of the envelope, let's take this side, plug it into our control input on the VCA. Plug this back into the input. Now we need something to trigger the envelope. So out of the sequencer here, we're going to take gate output 1, plug that into the trigger. works fine. ADSR, it does exactly what you expect an envelope to do. So if I turn everything all the way up to get a full envelope, that's the sort of thing that deserves a bit of delay, oops, and reverb. The last module we have to talk about is the filter. The filter. So it's always about the filter. So let's take the output of our oscillator, plug that into the input on our filter. Now the filter has three outputs, which gives it possibilities, I suppose, in that you can take three different results, well no, three identical results out to other bits of gear for processing. That's interesting. There's a few things about the 170 that really go, oh, you should be using this with a larger system, and that could be beneficial. That's one of those things. So is the three outputs from the square wave oscillator. All of those seem to suggest that you need to be playing in a bigger space with other machines. Sequencer also has 4 channels of sequencing. No good for a monosynth. Very interesting for a larger system. We'll come to these things and ponder them at some point. So let's take the output of the filter, plug that in to the VCA. Now to this point, everything seems to vanish. It all goes away. There's something there, you can hear it, you can also see it on the scope here. So what's going on? Well, this is, I don't know, I think this seems to be the biggest flaw of the 170, is that its filter cutoff doesn't really do very much. Now let me see if I can explain this properly, because I haven't been able to get any information out of Teenage Engineering about what is going on here. But and don't worry, it's fixable, kinda. It's fixable within itself. But this is just to demonstrate the filter in itself not doing very much. I mean, we know that this square wave is making an output. If I plug this into here, we've got a thing. Let's put it back to a sensible. So we know that square wave is doing something. So if we then plug it into the filter input, plug the output of the filter into the VCA, we're not really getting anything. We know there should be something, there just bleeding isn't. So if we look at it on a spectrum analyzer, we can see that there is something very low happening. And all this really means is that even though I've got the cutoff frequency all the way open, it is in fact not open very much at all. Let me see if I can demonstrate this better using some noise, a source of noise. So I've got some white noise out of a module just out of shot, and I'm going to plug that into the filter. And with noise plugged in, you can see that there is a little bit of a signal here. If I open that up, I can't. I can close it and it goes away. That is the edge of the cutoff for this low pass filter. It's coming in just here beneath what we can hear. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that the filter by itself is no good. You can't open the cutoff frequency far enough to get a sound out of it. Sometimes you can kind of just about, if you push the resonance up a little bit, you can find it in there and you adjust the tuning on something, but obviously I'm using white noise now, so that's not a factor. So what do you have to do? Well, you have to push the cutoff up using these control inputs here. So it needs modulation in order to get it. So for instance, let me take triangle, plug that into the control input. So there it is. So essentially this knob here provides a kind of an offset to what's coming into the control input. So if I now put our synthesizer back through, that is our filter. So I think what the design intends for this is for you to take an output from the envelope and plug that into the control input. And that's how you get the filter to work. Now, of course, because it has two control inputs, I can also take the control from the triangle wave as well. So actually, once you grab hold of the filter, it becomes a very beautiful thing. Before we get into some more interesting patching and possibilities, let's have a look at the 16 sequencer. Now the 16 sequencer is exactly the same as the Pocket Operator Modular 16 sequencer, which is a standalone sequencer. They are identical, except this one runs by itself. And I'm going to be doing a proper deep review of the 16 all by itself, running other bits of Eurorack. So look out for that. But in the meantime, let's have a quick run through of the 16. And if you really are desperate for the depth, then check out the full review I'll be doing at another time. Now, I'm not entirely sure if it's an omen or not, but I've got the cockerel next door screaming its head off at the rolling thunder, which is coming in, which I just have to treat it as hilarious as opposed to something which is going to drive me nuts. So please excuse the environmental noise and let's get on with having a look at the sequencer. So you've got 4 channels. It's not, I would not ever call this an intuitive sequencer, it is in some ways awkward. Awkward a bit like the Mother 32 sequencer is awkward. In fact, it shares perhaps some similarities with that. But once you've got over or around or practiced enough to get through the awkwardness, it has an immense amount of power. Well, first of all, it's got 4 channels. You've got 3 here, CV, and then 3 gate for the first 3 channels. And then you've got a separate channel called keyboard gate and keyboard CV, which are the other way round to these ones. And these have 3 outputs each, although they all do the same thing. So you've got like one track which has 3 outputs, all outputting the same stuff, and then 3 other separate tracks. It's almost like it's designed to slightly trip you up for no reason by the way that it's laid out. But let's not worry about that. Let's just enjoy it as it is. You've got these 16 knobs, which you would initially think are really, really useful. I've not really found them useful, but I'll show you that they can indeed be useful. And then you have this keyboard of 16 notes. This is very useful, although to press it requires quite a little bit of effort. But hidden in here are some rather nice features and effects. So I don't know, let's get a little bit started. So we've got something plugged in to the first one. So what you do, you go track 1, make sure you're on track 1. So you've got to hold that. See, there's a light that comes on, press T1, I'm now on track 1. I press program, a little thing comes on. That'll do. And I've programmed a sequence. See, that was easy. Now I can put other notes in or clear bits out as I like. I can go up an octave. You can stick in other bits. And you can clear it like that. Make sure you're on track 1, hit program, try again. Try that. You can transpose using this octave button. Take it out of program for the moment. Hold octave. There's these 4 effects possibilities here. If you hold track and hit them, they do vaguely interesting things to your track. Now 11 and 12 are glide and legato. Okay, yeah, I'm not convinced by the last two, but the first two certainly either shorten stuff or do a doubling up, which is quite interesting. You can also mute and solo between tracks using the T buttons here and the S buttons here. You've also got some scales, so you can adjust that as well. There's a lot more to this than meets the eye, and it starts getting interesting once you start patching other bits and pieces in, which I'll do a little bit of later on. It's not the easiest thing in the world to play with. That's its main problem. But what I find is just putting in a sequence is really very easy and nearly always very pleasing. The 16 knobs then, let's see if we can work out what the heck they're all about. Now these control pitch, or the control voltage of the 16 keys. They don't control the steps, they control the keys. That's the important thing to understand. So to demonstrate that best, I need to put all 16 keys into a sequence. So let's do that. Nice. Now what happens is that these then affect the notes. So let's pick note number 9. There you go. So you see, they can be useful. But the slight difficulty is that you don't really know which step you're on. There's no light to indicate which step you're on. So now that I've messed about with these, the notes on the keyboard are no longer what you expect them to be. Now that's a pro and a con. It's a pro because I can go to number 7, tune it to what I want it to be. You have to move the knob round so it catches up whatever it's on. If you see what I mean, so I can program using the knobs the exact pitches that I want, and then when I do my program, I have them set to exactly what I want them to be. So it's weirdly interesting, weirdly useful, except now that my keyboard is no longer a keyboard as I expect it to be. It's now set by all the weird notes on here. I can get it back though if I invoke one of the scales. It's now back to what it was. But then these have to go all the way around to catch up if I wanted to change it again. As I say, it's interesting, it's slightly weird, it doesn't do exactly what you kind of think it does, but at the same time what it does do is interesting and useful, and there's 4 tracks and channels of it, and there's an arpeggiator with multiple modes, and you can put in You can put in rests as well as ties. You can also change the individual note length of each individual note. Although that's not that easy, but you can. There's instructions, which are not brilliant, but they're there. I'll go into as much detail as I can when I review the M16 by itself, but I think that's probably enough for now, except to just demonstrate that you can use the CV here to control other things on the 170, and then we'll finish off by plugging it into a lot of other stuff. So if I do a nice straightforward like that, I'm going to take channel 2, plug that into the other side of the control, go to track 2, program, I've now got channel 2 running the filter. Yeah, simple, but really quite effective. Then why don't I take a little bit of modulation and stick that in somewhere. And to answer that other question, as to whether it's Lego compatible, yeah, of course it is. So if I bring in some other modular, I'm going to take channel 3 out to control an STO, channel 3 CV, and a gate to control the Cosmotronic Delta V, gate 3, turn it on to track 3. That's the STO. So if I program something into that, and run it, it should run with the rest of it. With a bit of luck using my skills on this keyboard, I should be able to solo different tracks. Oh, I have to hold it down, I think. Then there's one last bit of magic. I'll take the keyboard gate out, plug that into a kick drum. So this is track keyboard, track K. It's actually better to program when it's not running, I'm finding. Let's try that. Well, I'm very much enjoying the little Lego man sitting there. I mean, people have said it's a toy, it's all Lego and stuff. Well, it's Lego compatible. What can I say? That's actually quite fun, I have to say. But so what have we found? What have we found? How have you seen that? How have you heard it? Is it a toy? Is it a waste of time? Is it a synthesizer? What is it exactly? That's the question. Well, of course it's a little synthesizer. The 170 is a brilliant little thing. Now, stepping through the individual modules as I did, showing their shortfalls, the fact that the LFO is unipolar, the fact that the pulse width modulation on the oscillator only goes a little bit and then it's completely sort of useless, the fact that the filter doesn't open unless you apply control voltage to it. Those things are shortcomings in any synthesizer, but even despite those, you're able to get over them. Because the LFO is unipolar, it doesn't mess up the pulse width modulation. They work well together. The fact that the LFO goes into audio rate really quickly and easily means you can make all sorts of FM type tones within the 170 all by itself. The fact that the filter doesn't open is, well, it's just annoying, really. But because you have two outputs on the envelope and because you have two control inputs on the filter itself, there's lots of room for modulation using the sequencer to open it up or using the envelope to open it up. Or you can bring in something from somewhere else to open it up. So yes, it shouldn't be like that, but the way that you're using it, it really doesn't kind of matter that much. The sequencer itself is really interesting. I'm looking forward to spending time with the sequencer just on its own because there's a lot in there. It's not the easiest thing to get around. Because of this touch strip, you have to apply an awful lot of pressure to make it happen. So it's not an enjoyable playing experience, but for entering notes it's as good as, you know, most things, I suppose. It could do with lights telling you where the steps were. That would make it awesome. But as it is, it's got 4 channels of sequencing, so there's a lot you can do with it. Plus the weirdness of these knobs, which is not necessarily the way I would choose to do things, but then you can create a keyboard that has all your own pitches on it. So you can sort of program your pitches and then do your sequence, or do your sequence and then change and program the pitches. I don't know. It gives you various routes on doing the same thing, perhaps. During performance, you've got a couple of effects which sort of do work and then some sort of don't work, but you can solo tracks, which is quite interesting, or turn tracks on and off, you know, so you have room there to have the sequencer run a number of things and then interact with those live. That's quite interesting. As a box by itself, though, as a self-contained unit, you've got an over-featured sequencer which gives you a lot of possibilities within it itself and a good simple introduction to modular synthesis. Once you've got your head around the idea that the filter doesn't work as you thought it did, once you start patching stuff in, it's immensely enjoyable. It's such a fun object to play with. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, it's like a synth, yeah. It's a synth like other synths. You plug stuff together, and it works. But the beauty of the 170 is that it's completely modular. So you're playing with ideas like you would in a larger rack. You're playing with Euro rack ideas, with modular ideas of audio rate modulation and other modulations, of patching stuff together and finding and discovering sound, which is something that you can pull out of a Crave, you can pull out of a Mother 32. But that's not its focus. Whereas here, it's what you have to do, and it's what you start with. You can start employing the sequencer in to modulate different things, and just go to town. In fact, you could have two things going into the two things with the thing. Could I not take that third one and plug that into the control input on there? Indeed, I could. So if I go to track 3, turn on program, and that's the point of modular, is that you suddenly have an idea and you can express yourself differently. You can move things about differently and do stuff differently that you weren't doing before. Brilliant. So at the end of this, what do I make of it? Well, I've still got the 400 to look at as well, which is the bigger brother of this. 3 oscillators, a lot more stuff going on. Maybe that's a deeper dive into modular as a whole. But the 170 is deliciously simple. 1 oscillator, couple of LFOs, filter, envelope, output. And that simple combination of stuff gives you actually quite a remarkable range of tones and possibilities. The keyboard makes it awesome because you can just play stuff regardless of how hard it is to do that, and you can sequence, which is what you want. On a little synth, you just want to be able to play with that. Has an ARP, so you can also just get a load of stuff going like that. You know, that kind of stuff is brilliant. So I guess what I'm coming to is that despite its flaws, its very obvious flaws, it is a fun device to play with. And isn't that what you want? And ultimately, as I said before, as an object, it's awesome. It sits there looking awesome on your desk, and then it makes a pretty awesome sound. But if you've been interested in getting into modular synthesis in some way, what options do you have under 500 quid? I mean, 500 quid will get you like the nifty case and a couple of modules, yes, plus 1 extra module maybe. So you've got a tiny little system and a tiny little voice. Possible. This would give you more than that, I think. People have talked about the knobs being a bit wobbly. I wanted to address that. Yeah. They're a bit knobbly. Sometimes they're a bit hard to turn, perhaps you could say. Not ideal. The ones with the flaps on are slightly better. But you could put Lego over the top. But they're no less fiddly than the little knobs you get in Eurorack. And no less stable. So maybe that's a thing, maybe it isn't. But overall, the style and usability of it is good. It's good. It's just fun. I don't know what else I can say other than that. So I think, hopefully, that's enough to give you a flavour of what is possible with this little synth. I think it's a good way into modular synthesis. It will teach you about how to route control voltage and audio around about in a modular without having to invest in something huge and enormous. It gives you a place to play. It's completely portable, can be battery powered, has a speaker, or you plug in some headphones, and you can sit outside and have a nice time. I don't believe for a minute that Teenage Engineering have designed this to compete with a complete modular system or a bigger synth. It is what it is, which is a fun device, part of the Pocket Operator series of stuff, which are these little 80 quid little things that make silly noises. This is more designed for that and can also connect up to that and sync to it. It can also kick out MIDI. Did I say that? I don't think I did. Sequencer can also do MIDI. So it is put together with that kind of vibe, that it is entry level, that it is fun, that it's something you can stuff in your bag and bring out and have a load of good times with. It's not trying to be an ultimate badass synthesizer. It's just a fun box of modular stuff, and truly modular stuff. So there you are. I hope that was helpful. Do look out for my build video on this that I did with my kids, and also look out for the review I'm going to do on the 16 sequencer by itself, and also the POM 400, the big yellow one. I'm doing a review of that very soon too, so look out for those. And in the meantime, go make some tunes.